who works for Google. He has a master's degree in physics from Cambridge. He spent some time at Apple building video capture and live streaming into OS X, many of you are using today. He was a principal engineer at Technorati, and he was responsible for the spiders. They go through and do the magic that Technorati does. And today he's going to talk to us about an emerging framework they're working on for building social applications. Please help me welcome Kevin Marks.
Is that working? Okay. Okay. So, rather than talk about the API details of Open Social, I thought I'd step back a bit and talk about the thinking and the background behind it. That seemed to be a better fit for this conference than a lot of API calls. So, I hope I called that right. So what I'm going to talk about is what I'm calling the social cloud. So I should explain this. My generation draws the internet as a cloud that connects everyone. This is an abstraction. We draw it as a cloud around the network because we don't want to think about all the wires and stuff in between. When Tim Berners-Lee invented the web down the road, expressed this in the same way recently when he was writing about the giant global graph of social software. You can write programs so the net is just one big cloud, and you don't have to worry about what's going on in between. And that's very freeing. So you start out with this idea as a programmer that you can just send a message anywhere and it'll come out the other end to someone else's computer, and then you extend that to documents, and that gives you the web. So you have this cloud around connections between computers and a cloud around web documents. It just becomes very, very easy for you to assume that stuff will work and not have to think about anymore. It's what Douglas Adams calls somebody else's problem field around it. You can forget about it. And what you find is that once the programmers and engineers become used to this idea of something disappearing, the users do too. So the younger generation doesn't see the cloud. They experience it as oxygen. It's just something that's always there. My son, Andrew, has been using the computer since he was 2, and I was out walking with him one day. He was asking me about what it was like when I was young. And he said, "Did you have Cartoon Network when you were little?" And I said, No, when I was little there were 3 TV channels. The TV was black and white. There was nothing on in the daytime. Oh, we had children's programs for 2 hours a day in the afternoon. And he thought about this for a bit as we were walking along. He said, "You must have spent all your time on the net then." For him, it's just part of the world. He couldn't imagine it not being there. And the corollary of this is that the older generation who didn't grow up with this don't get this at all. They see this cloud of ours as poison gas that's sneaked out of the pipes and is causing trouble and confusing them. And this is a problem we have to contend with legislators and people who are used to selling you pipes and tubing and interconnectivity. But I don't want to go into that too much. But it does play into how we deal with the social software environment. Because suddenly there's a new set of complexities here. There's bits and pieces flying around in all directions. There's new social sites being built all the time. And there's a timeline here on the right, which I deliberately made too small for you to see, just so you can see there's lots of them spreading out from over the last 10 years. And it's bubbling up into our consciousness, and we weren't really aware of it because it's something that's sort of happening to us in the same way that the net happened to that generation before us. And I don't know if you know XKCD, but he did this great cartoon of the internet online world as a map of unknown countries. And you can see in MySpace and Orkut and so on, all the different places marked out on there that you have to explore. And you don't necessarily know all these countries. You may have visited a few of them, but it's a different world out there. The other thing that's changed, that sort of makes me feel like one of the old generation, is that we assumed email is there and it's part of the web and it's your default experience. Whereas for the young generation, it's like, no. Because we remember when email was always useful. You got an email with something exciting, something came in, it was like a message from my friends, it's great. For them, it's just like all this stuff pours in every day, and like maybe 10% of it has something in. And they only use email to talk to us, or to the bank or the teacher or something. So from their point of view, email's not for them. It's not, so the way we think of an email address as being us, they don't. They think of their social network identity as being them, or their blog as being them, or possibly their phone number as our session, but it's not their email anymore. But there's an insight there, which is that all these things on the web that we think of as documents, and again, that's part of our infrastructure. We assume in our cloud all the stuff on the web is documents. Actually, a lot of these URLs are people. Out there on the web, there's all these pages and sites, but some of them are actually people, and they have links between them the same way the documents do. But if you're used to blogging, you're used to referring to somebody by their URL. You'll say, Stephanie, and link to Stephanie's blog, is doing that. So you're saying that blog is Stephanie. The links between these websites that are people are expressing relationships. And there's actually a way of formalizing these relationships. There's a standard that was put together a few years back called XFN. There's another standard called FOAF. And they label the links between the sites to say, this site's me, and this site's also me, and this site's also me. And this is my friend over here, and this is my friend over there. And you can actually connect these relationships together and make some sense of it. So that leads to the Social Graph API, which was the thing we launched 2 weeks ago now, which Brad Fitzpatrick's been working on since he joined Google, which finds the websites that can be treated as people, which is things like blogs and social network profiles and so on, and returns the me and the friend links between them. So you can call this API and say, okay, here's my URL, which other ones are me, which other ones have I marked as me, which other ones have I marked as friends, and who's marked me as a friend, and it pulls that stuff back using these open standards. Now this is the publicly declared, publicly performed links on the web, where you've sat there and made a website and joined all these pieces up with friend links and rel links. And it's using the standard Google crawler, so it's not poking around inside the sites, it's just pulling out what people have made public on the web. So that's great, you've made an API, what's that good for? Well, there are people who have problems with social networking sites because they've joined too many of them, or because, I am looking at you, yes, Robert. So, they see this big problem that I've got to join a new social networking site, I've got to go and find all my friends and connect them all together. And it's a problem for the developers too, because the developers who want to make a new site, they say, right, I'm making a new site, I need users. And where am I going to get users? I've got to go out and get them to sign up, I've got to write registration code and pull them all in, and then they've got to tell me who their friends are, and it's a bunch of work for everyone. Because they look at this world out there of all these little countries and they think, I want my own private island. So they build their new site out there, and they say, right, now I need to get people to join. Now, some of them will work and be able to get people to join, but then you have to go through the thing of, here's my friend again, yes, look, there's Robert again, and go through. So one thing you can do with the Social Graph API is find out the friends they've already got on other sites they've already expressed. So here the example is, and I apologize, it's the most complicated diagram I've got, I think. Brad here, B1 on the right, is joining Twitter. And so he tells Twitter, oh, here's my main site, here's my homepage. And that homepage, so Twitter makes a me link to that site. That homepage makes a me link to Brad Fitz's LiveJournal. And on LiveJournal, all his friends that he's collected over the years there are marked up. So you can see Brad's linked to Jane. But Jane's LiveJournal is also linked to her Twitter account. So calling this API can say, it can find these connections, and Twitter can say, this Jane over here is the same as the Jane you know over there. Do you want to be friends? Do you want to bring those friends in straight away? So it can save the time of making all those connections again. But it's, you can see the sort of traversal you have to go through to do it, but it saves time for the new website, the new island that's trying to connect to the rest of the countries, and it saves time for the users because they don't have to go around saying, yep. One by one, discover them, they can just get a big list and say, yes, no, I didn't actually want Jane on here, and work through that way. Whoop, wrong button. So The social graph API puts this cloud around finding me and finding my public friends on the web. It means that we can assume that that's there, and it's abstracted that stuff away, which means we can assume that these public connections you've already asserted and made on the web can be discovered and can be reused in other places. So that's good. We've put a cloud around something there. But over here in social network lands, all the people out there are thinking, but my friends are all here already. I'm quite happy being here on MySpace or Xanga or Cyward or whatever I've picked out as my place to keep friends. Why do I have to go and sail to your island and get a new passport and deal with all this complexity? Because inside this site, I've got a whole other set of friend connections that aren't public, that aren't performed to the whole web. They're just public within this site. I've got a set of friendship relationships I declared in here, and they have different degrees and nuances depending on the site, and they'll mean different things to me. And I don't really want them pushed out to the whole world necessarily. I just want them to stay where they are. But I still want to try out your new application that you're trying to build and persuade me to do interesting things or play casual games or any of the other things we've been talking about today. So where's my cloud for this? I need a cloud around that complexity. So that's where there's a bunch of things here that the developers have to think about, which means that if we're thinking about them, we want clouds around them so we don't have to think about them, we can concentrate on what we really want to do. So one is the friend relationships and all the stuff that's on the site. If you're a developer, you don't really want to have to think about writing registration code and collecting people and pulling them together. There's the activity flow that people are making. So the streams of events that they create by their actions on the site, which you see in things as blog feeds or the live general usage feed or your Twitter stream or your Facebook event stream, all these places that are basically flows of actions that you've made on the site. And then the third thing is data that you've got that's associated with people. So you've got to say, okay, I'm building an application, I want to tie this data to this person and tie this data to this person and then pull them back together again to make my high score table for my game or my list of upcoming birthdays or whatever this information is. You want to be able to store that and put it back together. So we want a cloud around each of these things. So that's what open social is, pulling clouds around that, abstracting that stuff away so that you don't have to worry about it. So you can write one application that asks for these three things, that says, okay, who are the friends of this person, what's their recent activities, and can I store some information that's tied to them? And then when your other person installs the app, you can draw that information back and say, okay, your friend over here did this with the app already. They did it last week in the activity stream, and oh look, here's here's their high score, here's the photo that they made, here's the story they're telling, whatever it is you're trying to do in a social way. So this abstracts this stuff out, so you don't have to go around and write it separately for each social networking site. You can write your game with that stuff in the cloud, or your game, whatever it is you want to write, and take it to where the people are. So you've now got a cloud around people, friends, and actions and data in the context of each of those sites. So that's nice. That's the other cloud that we've built, the other social cloud here. So there's a third thing that we need to worry about, and that's relationships. Now you may have noticed that I've put these little labels on the people that I've been showing photographs of so far. This is the XFN standard for expressing relationships between people and links. And there's 13 of them, and they cover quite a lot of cases, and it seems quite useful. But as my friend Dana would point out fairly vociferously, it's more complicated than that. She tells lots of stories about how people behave on social networking sites. She's been studying this for years. One particular one is that people don't break friend links on the sites. Once you've actually said this person's my friend, even if it's just some random person you saw and you weren't sure who they were, but you just, yeah, why not, they're my friend. You don't break them, except in one case. The only case where you break the friends link, if someone's had a messy breakup, or if you've had a messy breakup and you say, okay, I'm splitting up with you, I'll cut that friend link, you're not my friend anymore. And if it's particularly messy, then some of the friends will split up as well. And that's the case where you see relationships explicitly broken. But if it's not as severe as that, if it's just oh, I friended someone by mistake, or it's like, yeah, he's not really my friend. You don't do that. But what she said was that at some point, people get fed up with this, and rather than break these friend links, they say, I forgot my password. I've got to make all my friends again, and then they only invite the ones they still want to keep. And so they will sort of deliberately destroy the profile that the social network site is so proud of and create a new one with fewer friends in it, and then they've got plausible deniability. They can say, oh no, I lost the password, I forgot you, I'll connect you again. And that deniability is a really important part of software. You've got to have something to blame. It's like, your spam filter must have got my email. It's one of those things. I was going through the tunnel and the phone cut out. If you've got a bit of blamability in the technology, it's actually much more attractive than something that's perfectly reliable, because then you can do the kind of lying Genevieve was talking about yesterday and say, oh no, it's not. It's my tools are failing me. I'm sorry. And you can be all apologetic and nice. Brad actually told me a similar story. Brad invented LiveJournal and did the social graph API, so he's been doing this stuff for years. And he said a long time ago, he did one of those tools that looks at your friends and tries to find the people that you should know because all your friends know them. And he said, he thought this would be a great tool for LiveJournal, it would be really helpful. And he ran this, and it gave him a list of his ex-girlfriends, because it had done exactly what Dana had said and found the ones where the links had been explicitly broken. So there's a lot of second-order subtlety to this stuff. Here's another example. This is from the Wikipedia entry on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And you can see here that the 13 XFN relationships aren't quite enough. We've got things like brother and guardian of, or nearly eloped with, which is a relationship. So I love this. I love the book, and the nuances of human relationship that you get in a classic novel or a great movie or another work is the kind of thing that might just hint to the computer scientist that you can't really distill it all down to 13 relationships. So here's another example of another diagram of the same Pride and Prejudice. This one comes from Cliff Notes, and you notice that the edges here have wonderful things like disapproves of her marriage. And this one here in the middle that I think is actually we might want to codify because it seems to be used a lot, which is initially dislikes, then falls in love with. I think, I've seen a lot of films that would actually be a really viable relationship mapping thing to reuse. Yeah, pays to marry Lydia, okay. Spreads rumors about, There's some subtlety here. And this pulls me back to Douglas Adams, who I mentioned earlier with the Somebody Else's Problem Field. He wrote a wonderful essay in 1999, which I keep citing all over the place, but one thing he said was, of course you can't trust what people tell you on the web any more than you can trust what people tell you on megaphones, postcards, or restaurants. Working out the social politics of who you can trust and why is quite literally what a very large part of our brain has evolved to do. So trying to subsume that into the computer is hubristic, and we're doing it, but there are all these little bits and pieces of social software sites that are trying to do bits of this, and they sort of do it in their cumbersome way, but they're fallible and blamable, and you can say, oh, well, I didn't really mean to mark you as an acquaintance rather than a friend. It was just the way the software worked. So you can apply your brain to that. But it begs the question of, is there something useful we can do with software here? Well, where's our cloud for the relationship stuff? Where is the abstraction that we can wrap around this to use to stop us having to worry about it in our code? But actually, it turns out that there is an easy answer to that, because the abstraction is in your head. All you really need to do is be given back a list of people with photographs and names and whatever else, and the information attached to those people, and you can use your own brain to decide which ones you actually trust, and no, he's always making stuff up, and oh yeah, well, she would say that, and you're doing that yourself, and the software hasn't got a chance in hell of understanding this, but by feeding it, by being able to find out the relationships with people and the people you assert connections with, it can use the software in your back of your head to help you work out which messages to value and which ones not to. So there's an abstraction there that's useful for the software and that's useful for the user, and can help you handle the complexities of communication just by feeding you back that stuff is related to people. So the social cloud, I'm talking about, there's two things here. There's open social that puts the cloud around social networking sites and the details of friends, the details of people, the details of what the actions they do, and the data you store. So as a developer, that's what it gives you. What that means in the future is that your users will take that as implicit, and they'll assume that your software can know about stuff about you, stuff about your friends, stuff about your actions, and take that into account. In the same way that my son assumes that the web is always there, he can always look things up on Wikipedia, that if he gets stuck on a game, someone out there will tell him how to fix it. Because we'll be able to subsume this stuff that's all fresh and new and complicated in the social networks now into an abstraction that any piece of software can use. And in the same way, the stuff in the back of your head, the friendships, the trust, and the context that you bring to the people you're interacting with, the software will be able to use that by giving information back to you to think about. And that's it.